Hello, everybody, and happy Halloween. If you're watching this afterwards, then you missed it. But in honor of the holiday, the scary one, I thought I'd put out another video. I might do another one tomorrow, which will be a little more professional, or maybe it won't if I rush it. But who knows? But this is going to be another RPG video, and I thought, it's the holidays, so why not do one about horror in RPGs? And I'm gonna start this off by saying that never had the chance to play a Call of Cthulhu game or play in an actual horror RPG game, which is something that I'm pretty sad about. It's something I'd always like to do, and I'd really like to do. But no DM that I've ever been playing with has ever. I mean, they've shown interest in it, but they've never gotten a game off the ground. But I do have some experience in that. From the small amount of games that I've actually run, I have run a horror game. But even then, my experience with horror in RPGs is more of the aliens kind rather than like the slasher or the psychological. And by aliens, I don't mean like probing. I mean like Aliens, the movie, like a war movie mixed with a horror movie. Things with the horrors of war, and that comes with a lot of different things. And I'm going to be talking about how to do horror in games, or at least how I think a good way to do it would be, and the dangers of running horror in games, and the kind of things that you might run into if you're starting out and you want to do something a little bit different, rather than just your average dungeon crawl or whatever you do when you just start playing. Um, yeah, the big problem I found with running a horror game is it's hard to judge what's going to be scary when you're actually playing. In my game, I had several things that were unnerving. The game that I ran was a custom game that I made up in a custom setting. But if I can give a little summary or like a thing to just make you understand better, so I can give better examples, it was kind of like a mix between like Metal Gear, System Shock, and like Raid Redemption. It was just it was sort of amalgam of things. It was my players all really enjoyed it, and I enjoyed the shit out of running it, and they were scared. They did get scared. But the parts that they got scared at and got excited during were not the parts that I expected to. In the game, I included some, like if you've ever seen Aliens Resurrection, that one scene where Ripley finds all the other clones that were like failures, and they're like, "Kill me, kill me." And they also did a joke on that in South Park, and that scene fucking terrified me ever since I was a little kid. And so I had some scenes like that because the storyline did involve cyborg and genetic manipulation. It involved a lot of like body horror type stuff, and there were a few scenes like that, and the players just they didn't click with it. For some reason, I mean, the scenes were effective, and it's not like the players were bored during them, but they didn't get scared. Then they it didn't pull them out of the game, but it was just kind of disappointing to see that they didn't react as a creative way as they did for other parts of the game that to me were less scary. But I guess that all comes with presentation. So I think with horror more than any other game that you're going to run, you should really practice your flavor text, or not even text, but you know what I'm talking about. Whenever you arrive in a new city in an RPG or arrive at a dungeon, you have a little paragraph that you've written out, or every time you see a monster, you have a little paragraph you've written out that you rehearsed, or you don't rehearse, but you have it written out and you read it, and because you want it to seem a little more put together or epic or whatever. And I think in horror games, more than any other type of game, it's really, really important to set the mood. It's always important to set the mood in an RPG. It always is. But I mean, the getting the exact right feel doesn't make or break your dungeon crawl. But if you're doing something that has horror in it, it's not going to be scary if you don't do it right. The line between scary and silly and action can blend a lot, especially when you're in an RPG where they don't have the visual input, and a lot of times they don't have the sound because it's hard to do soundtracks sometimes because it can overpower the speech of the players, especially when you're running it online, and I was running it online. So I would say it's very important to rehearse your little speeches. Give them that good cadence, make them creepy, get into graphic details, like really creepy details, and always find something to hang on, and remember what makes things scary. Read into the uncanny valley. Read some like H.R. Geiger. Read scary things, scary books especially, or listen to like Suspense, which is put out by Orson Welles back in the 30s, I believe. Listen to like some horror-based radio plays. That's what I mean. I'm really into radio plays, which is kind of a weird thing to be into. I get it, and not many people share that interest, but it really does help if you're running an RPG because RPGs are mostly an audio medium. They're all theater of the mind, right? But the part that you actually interact with is hearing and speaking. So if you're practicing your flavor, it'd be a good idea to listen to some scary things that are audio only, and that might help to be able to set the mood better and make your flavor text and your characters appear actually scary. Horror in RPGs is kind of hard to do. I've thought about it a lot because horror movies and horror books are among my favorite genres. I would say my favorite genres just in general in all of art are like science fiction and horror and like mystery and noir. Sorry, I can't raise this finger without raising my pinky. Other way around though, I can do that. I can do that just fine if I want to be Bam Margera. Whatever, douchebag. Some douchebag. And no, so what I'm saying is it's hard to be scary because in RPGs, a lot of times players get a feeling of invincibility. And that feeling of invincibility is pretty rightfully thought of because most things, if you make a really stupid decision in an RPG, or at least a decision that the DM in his mind is like that'll kill you, but you don't know that, the DM will probably cut you some slack. There's a lot of that goes on. And while I'm not saying you should always cut your players some slack, in fact, I generally don't. A lot of people, Brian, in a game that I ran, did something fucking retarded, and I killed his ass. So, there you go. But horror is really, it's really difficult, and it's difficult to make things scary. A lot of times, having your game set in a castle or a creepy graveyard or something that you'd see in a 1930s horror movie that I fucking love. I love that kind of atmosphere. Is not going to scare your players. They're not going to be like, ooh, it's spooky. Unless, of course, you're playing in a dark room with candelabras and, Swan Lake played in the background. But the things, at least that I've found, are the tense moments, the moments that come quickly. The scariest moment in this game that I was alluding to earlier came when the party was about to be overrun. They were in an apartment building, and they had to get from one apartment that was about to be overrun to another one, and or just to escape. And it was really tense because for that game, I kept the pace very, very quick. And that's a problem I found with D&D, 3.5 Pathfinder, just about all of them. 4th edition especially, oh my god, is that fights take forever. And so a lot of times in 4th edition, actually I gotta give it up to 4th edition, had one cool thing, which was the out-of-combat encounters, which some people argued would pull you out of the game and to systemize roleplay, which I get and I agree with a little bit, but it did fix the fact that their encounters lasted like 8 hours, even to kill like 5 goblins. So, and the minion system was really cool, and I think people have adopted that in any D&D game. It's a very simple thing to implement. You don't even need to do any cross-jiggering with stats. You just gotta be like, oh, this orc, he's got 1 hit point. It's really easy. So people have done the minion system and a bunch of shit. So those are 2 decent things about 4th edition. But that's the aside, is that the pace is so slow that it becomes difficult to ramp up tension. And that's why I like games like Shadowrun and World of Darkness for horror, because with those types of games where you don't have to worry about the tabletop, it's so much easier to make it a quicker pace, right? You go, if you have an initiative order, or if you don't, but if you have an initiative order, you go like, all right, you have, the thing's coming at you. It's coming at you really, really quickly. What do you do? And then if they're like dilly-dallying, then you remind them, you're like, it's getting closer, its jaws are opening, viscera and blood and organ bits you can see between its teeth as it closes in on you. It's no more than 6 inches away from your face. What do you do? And you can keep doing that until you irk the player into actually acting. And it can make it effective. And that's something you can't really do when you have to worry about turn order and movement speed and standard actions and swift actions and move actions and all the different actions that come with playing Pathfinder 3.5 or just about any other D&D. So yeah. But in terms of things that make it scary, for me, I had to have NPCs. I had to have several, actually. In the game, there was one NPC that was with the party as a member of their unit, and then there was a large group of NPCs that were also in the apartment building that weren't enemies. They were allies, but they weren't really connected. Like, the two groups never really met. The closest they came was, like, they heard the party heard a bunch of those guys getting killed. And, see, that seemed like the easiest solution to jack up the atmosphere, was to have other people that were, if not a little bit less than you, but like about on an even keel with you in terms of power level and equipment, get killed, and get killed quickly and painfully, so that way the party can understand that what they're facing is a real danger. And that goes in any setting. That does not just have to be horror. But I find that without doing that, I mean, I don't want to do that. That's kind of trite now. That's kind of played out. But it's difficult for me to think of any other way of actually engineering the suspense for a party that doesn't know the enemy. Like, they don't have meta knowledge of, like, oh, that's a Cthulhuoid monster. We shouldn't fuck with that, because I've read the bestiary for Call of Cthulhu. Like, without that kind of player knowledge, sometimes it can be difficult to make your enemies appear very threatening. And in a horror movie, a horror game, that's all that it's about. It's all about making your enemies appear threatening and like they can beat the party's ass, and that the party has no chance. Because, if you're doing something horror, they have to run, they have to hide, they have to get scared, things have to get tense. And, so I've been thinking about that a lot, and I'll probably do a follow-up video if and ever I run another horror game, and I'll update and say, things that I've done that have made it a little more tricky. But yeah, it is difficult. I mean, one way of doing it is to have one of your players get hit, and get hit hard. Like if I was watching a bunch of Friday the 13th movies, and a lot of times the hero, because the virgin character never dies in those movies, she'll be with the group, and at least one of them is gonna die, and and Freddy or Jason will just smack one of them, and they'll fly into a wall. That might be effective. I've never tried that per se, but and it would seem a little trite, especially because you need to have that guy kill somebody immediately afterwards in order to be effective. But getting hit and hit hard is not a bad way. Also, overwhelming force is also not a bad way. No matter if your players are any kind of smart, and you put an army at them, or if they're 3 dudes and you have 20 guys out there that have better gear and more guns or more weapons or whatever than they do, that might scare them. And then if you have that party notice them and then start hunting them, I mean, that's cool. There's a scene in Raid Redemption where the main character has to hide in a wall while a group of only about 5 dudes, but it's 5 dudes against you, and you're pretty hurt, and you're also caring for your buddy who's got his leg cut. That's the situation that was in the movie. And he had to hide in a wall, and so during that scene, they're doing that typical Nazi search thing that you see in Nazi movies. Where they're stabbing the pillows and the mattresses, and at one point the enemy stabs into the wall the guy's hiding in, And that's fucking tense. It's really tense, as in the movie, because the movie's very good, and I'd recommend you go see it or find it. And but something like that could work pretty well in an RPG if the character has found some sort of hiding spot, or or even if the character is like sneaking around the castle or whatever. Your rogue is sneaking into the in the Baron's castle, and then he's on a lower floor and he hears a commotion up above him coming from the balcony, and then suddenly a body falls and lands right in front of him, and it's all fucked up, and there's organs coming out and her arms are cut off and she's looking like something out of the Black Dahlia. Things like that can be effective because it doesn't directly hurt your party, but it shows the intentions of the villains or the monsters or what have you. So yeah, I'm gonna keep these videos shorter now since my first RPG slash video in general was freaking long, and I don't think y'all want to sit through that. So I'm gonna cut this off here. I mean, it's a good 16 minutes long, but yeah. If you guys have any other stories about horror in games or any other tips that you'd like to share with people, please leave them in the comments, or, you know, do a video response, even though YouTube doesn't do video responses anymore because it's a load of bunk. So yeah, happy Halloween, everybody, and this has been The Smoke Break.